Hello everyone, this is Ben, and in this video we're going to be talking about the historical evidence for, two things. One is Jesus' existence / crucifixion, because those kind of come as a package deal, so we'll think of those as one thing. The historical sources that provide evidence for his crucifixion are also providing evidence for his existence in general. And then 2 is the historical evidence for the empty tomb of Jesus. That there was an empty tomb. Now the empty tomb is interesting because it's not really the resurrection, it's just that there's an empty grave. There's lots of empty graves in this world. It doesn't prove resurrections. There's multiple explanations for why a grave might be empty, but we have really good evidence that the tomb was empty. Now these 2 points, the existence and crucifixion of Jesus, they're so well evidenced that they are actually accepted by the consensus of historians. Like, this is not really a debatable point. Realistically, this is the man on the street, someone that you in a message forum online might debate it, but like historians who take this stuff seriously don't debate it. Of course, the consensus doesn't mean 100%, but it means basically 100%, because there's always a couple wacko professors. Just FYI, what a consensus is. On any issue at all whatsoever, but the empty tomb is accepted by the majority of New Testament, historians of this time frame and this era, So the empty tomb has better than 50% acceptance, but it's nothing like the consensus that the other point has. Okay, so we're going to do the existence and crucifixion first. And what we're going to do is prove this using non-Christian sources. And the reason why I think it's better to use non-Christian sources for this is that, Christian sources, it's like, okay, Jesus was crucified. Matthew says it, Luke says it, Paul says it, yada yada. It's like, yeah, but they are... That's one of the central tenets of Christianity, that Jesus died for our sins. So, they do have a stronger motivation to lie in that case. So, in terms of just early attestation, I don't know if they are the best source for that. We could get around that problem, but that would take more time than just using non-Christian sources. So it's not like we can't get around that problem. For example, I have another video that makes the point that the apostles preached Jesus' resurrection, and entailed in his resurrection is that he was crucified, and that means he existed. Those are things that are entailed in that. But they preached his resurrection and that they sincerely believed it and went to their deaths for it. So we can prove that. And so if that's the case, then we should take their word on him existing. So if you've already accepted what I said in that video, then you're good on this. You could just say, well, the apostle said he existed and was crucified, and we know that they sincerely believed that, and they were in position to know that, so that's the end of the story on that. But if we were just to take a shorter route where we don't have to go through everything with that video, we can just do this with non-Christian sources, just referencing historical documents written by non-Christians. And the other benefit of this is it's helpful for us to do historical. The thing is, we're trying to prove overall Christianity true historically. We need to look at non-Christian sources anyway. We need to have an idea of what people outside of the Christian camp have to say, so that we can have a more complete or full view of the time period, of the history of the period, of this world. So we need to look at both sides of a wide array of authors that wrote back then. So first of all, we're going to take a look at two Roman historians who wrote actual historical accounts. They are considered historians. These are what they wrote are considered histories, or in the genre of history. So it's not the genre of myth. In terms of genre analysis, it's not the genre of biography like the Gospels are, but just general history. Okay, and historians have ways that they go about determining that. We talked about that in historical method video, but the general reliability of these two authors, for the most part, not 100% reliability, but for the most part, they are Roman authors, and they're Tacitus and Suetonius. And they are both considered, just in general, to be reliable. The issue is they say that they used official Roman records, and given when they wrote, their readers would have been able to double check them on that. So it makes it much less likely that they would have lied. In addition to that, and these records would have been the official government records, known to be accurate on this. I think I don't know how they go about this, but just the official Roman records, like the court records, this person was executed on this day for this crime. That's something that is going to be pretty reliable. Okay, the person knows that. It would be kind of weird to lie about that, and make that record when everybody would have known that it was a lie, in those situations, like official court documents and stuff. Okay, so there's that issue. On top of that, these authors go so far as to say there are certain issues where they don't have access to these official records, and they state so in their documents. So they'll say, okay, for this part here that I'm saying, I'm less certain about this because the source isn't so great. Alright. So there's that. Okay. There is debate about how reliable these sources are, Tacitus and Suetonius. If you look up, was Tacitus reliable, you get a lot of people debating about that. There's really two major points of debate. One is, did they interpret the facts? Their interpretation of the facts. Did their interpretation get flavored by what historians call a horizon? What we would call maybe a bias. That they had a particular point of view about, like Tacitus, did he have a particular point of view about corruption in government that flavored his, selection of which facts to put into his accounts, and maybe his description of those facts, So there's that issue. And then the other issue, which is more relevant for us, is what's called Christian interpolations. Because for both of these sources, and this is the real issue where, the reliability gets debated. For both of these sources, they're so ancient. Like Tacitus, his writings, basically we can date them to 110 AD. They're so ancient that the paper that they used at the time would have rotted by now, or did rot. So the only reason they've been preserved for us is not because somebody put them in Tupperware, or, and sent them to the moon or something. Rather, Christians took the time to recopy it. And so we have the manuscripts come from much later in the Middle Ages. And so the question of interpolation is okay, did Christians just add stuff in, these recopyist guys? A lot of times people think that is a problem with the Bible. It's not really a problem with the Bible because you've got so many people making so many copies in so many places that it'd be impossible to change them all. But with these there's way less copies here, and so it becomes a real issue when you're just got one copy, or something like that. Okay, so there are ways around the interpolation problem. It has to do with the point of view, but we'll see that as we get into it. But that's sort of the intro to at least the Tacitus and Suetonius part. Okay, so Tacitus just tells us this. He says Jesus was crucified by Pontius Pilate. He calls, and so you say, well, was this an interpolation? Well, he calls Christianity an evil that originated in Judea. Judea was what the Romans called Israel or Palestine. They called it the Roman province of Judea. Okay, he says Christianity is an evil that originated in Judea. He doesn't even call it Christianity. Okay, we can infer that that's what it is because he talks about, Pontius Pilate having crucified their leader. I forget exactly what he says. He calls it a mischievous superstition. And superstition in the Roman period meant when someone was too afraid of the gods and was like took the gods way too seriously, basically. And he said it had made its way to Rome by the time of Nero, and he says as all evils eventually do, that kind of thing. Okay, so given the point of view where he has a negative description of Christianity, it makes it unlikely that this is an interpolation by Christians. We know that Christians did update the way that he spelled the term Christian. He spelled it with an E, C-R-H-E, although it was in Latin, so it would have been different. Christian, and later Christians updated it. We can tell in the text that they updated it. We can literally see that they wiped out some of it, and there's an extra space in there, and where it used to be an E, and it was switched to an I. And that is a well-known issue that back in Tacitus's day, it was an E, was the normal spelling. And so that becomes important for us in terms of paleography and dating things. But the later Christians updated the spelling so that you could, and that's not really a huge interpolation. It's this word is spelled wrong. It's spelled right for back then, but we need to update it to the correct spelling for our day. It's just a spelling update because the way words are spelled changes. All right, so the experts agree that that's all they changed. So there you go. Pontius Pilate is a well-known historical figure. He's the 5th governor of Judea under Emperor Tiberius. He served under Tiberius. So communication between him and Emperor Tiberius would have been a matter of official public record. So these are just known things. His tenure ended when Tiberius's time as emperor ended, and I think it was 37 AD. Okay, so all right, let's see. Suetonius, we don't know exactly when he wrote this, but he died in 122 AD. Okay, so he is very negative about Christians. He says that Emperor Claudius expelled Christians from Rome. He actually says that Emperor Claudius kicked the Jews out of the city of Rome due to riots among the Jews due to a man named Chrestus, which was the correct spelling of Christ for that era, which apparently wasn't interpolated. Okay, so there's a cross-reference here because the book of Acts, which is roughly dated to 90 AD, and from the Bible, says that this happened. Okay, that there was this expulsion of Jews from Rome. It doesn't say anything about why, but according to Suetonius, it was riots over Jesus. So this would have been before, I think they date this to 48 AD. So this would have been before Paul even came to Rome, and that's exactly what Acts says. So now what we have are independent sources that are arriving on the same thing independently, and so that's a cross-reference. So it's okay, something happened. There was, all right, that happened, right? This expulsion of Jews from Rome happened. And since Suetonius is a reliable source, it was over Jesus. Okay? He also references that Christians were persecuted under Nero. And again, he's very negative about Christians, so it's not an interpolation. So I mean, you can already see that the case has been made, but let's just keep going.